Hey guys, what's up? So in today's video, I'm going to be taking you through how you can get started easily with your Pixel robot from Camerabotics. Now, I'm going to be taking you through hardware installation, the wiring connections, and I'm also going to be taking you through the software so you can have an easy and seamless setup experience. Now, before we get started, we're going to want to make sure that we have all the components in the shipping list and that we've received everything complete. And if there are any issues with this or any other part of the process, please feel free to reach out to the support team at Camerabotics. So we've got the robot out of the box, and the first thing that we want to do is install it on the mounting platform. Now, you might have your own ideas of how you want to mount this, but I'm going to take you through the Mitchell mount method, which is what I think most people are going to be using. So you've got a Mitchell mount tripod, and this will make your installation a lot easier by using the supplied Mitchell mount adapter. And one thing to note before we continue is that the cabling for this is permanently attached. So you can't actually detach this power and control cable from the robot. Also, I want to show you the main mounting mechanism for Mitchell mounts. So this is your robot to Mitchell mount adapter supplied by Camerabotics. And you can see all you have to do is just slot it in and just make sure that these locking mechanisms line up securely like that. And then you have your locking rings. And then this is your security or your locking ring. That's going to prevent that first one from coming undone. Now, I usually find it easier to mount the adapter to the robot whilst it's in a manageable position like this. So there are 4 securing bolts that actually comes with the robot, and we have 4 holes at the top of the mounting plate to attach those. So we'd go ahead and just screw those in. So what you want to do is attach these 4 bolts quite loosely to begin with, and then you can go ahead and start tightening them down. Now, the manufacturer's recommendation for these bolts is 20 Newton meters. Now, I don't necessarily have a torque wrench, and that is entirely up to you if you do want to tighten them, but I've got a good feel of what is secure without over tightening. So what I'm going to do now is attach the camera plate to axis 6, but the supplied camera bracket from Camerabotics does not allow you to mount it just now. So what I'll do, I'll disconnect this from here and I'll just mount this little part for the moment. So we just secure that using these 4 bolts just here. Now, as I said, this mounting plate does not attach because it's a bit too long for here. So we'd have to put that on after we've extended the robot to a position where we can actually fit this. No, I'm not actually using this camera plate. I've decided to use my own one, and what I'm going to do is just attach it loosely here. That way we don't have to do it later. And now we're ready to mount the robot on our tripod. And this is the reason why I find it easier to mount the adapter first. So then now I'm not having to deal with mounting 4 bolts while I hold the robot in position, but I can just go ahead and just use the securing collar using one hand, securing the robot whilst I do that. There is also a locking tool included with the Mitchell mount adapter, so you can get a little extra purchase when you're securing this, which is a nice touch. So now that we have the robot fully mounted, we can then move on to the wiring connections. Here we've got our control box, and I'm going to connect all of the connections except for the power supply. I'm going to leave that one for last, and it's more of a safety thing and just the way I like to do things, so we don't have any inadvertent powering up of this unit whilst we are plugging the other cables in and out. So the first one I'm going to attach is the robot power and data cable, and we're just going to plug it in where it says robot. So this is coming from the robot, and we have 2 connectors for that, and it's pretty self-explanatory. So if we attach the data cable just here, and then we're going to attach the power cables. And you can only fit this one way around. It'll only fit one way because of the keyway mechanism. So we'll plug these in, and we're going to just tighten these lock-in screws so that we can maintain a secure connection. The next up is the emergency button. Now we're just going to plug this in at the top where it says e-stop for emergency stop. And this is keyed as well, so we can't actually plug this in the wrong way around, as you can see. There's also lock-in screws in here, so you can securely lock that in position. One point to note whilst we're here, during shipping, this might actually come in the set position. So we just want to kind of make sure that is reset before we start anything, or we're going to run into issues later on when we come to actually try to power it up, which is only, solved by resetting it, but just so you know. Another point to note that it is actually key to have this installed. If this e-stop isn't installed, then we're not going to get any movement on our robot. We're going to have alarms, and we're going to have to obviously rectify that by plugging in the e-stop. The next up is our Ethernet cable from our laptop. So we're just going to plug that into LAN 1. And that is important that you get LAN 1 and not LAN 2 at this moment. And we're pretty much almost there. So the last and final thing we're going to need to plug in is our power cable that comes from our AC to DC adapter just here. And it tells you on the side as well for the DC input from here. And again, you can't really plug this anywhere else into this controller, and it's also keyed. We're going to want to try to screw these in so we can have a secure connection, especially on the power side, so it doesn't get pulled out inadvertently. And that is our wiring connection completed. So we're just going to power this up by pressing the power button just here once, and that will power up to life. So on the software side of things, we're going to have two bits of software. So we're going to have Lensmaster, which is ultimately what we're going to use to drive the robot, and we're going to have the Dobot Studio software as well. Now, it is important that we get the right version that is compatible with this particular robot. And the version that works is 2.8.3. So one of the first things that we actually want to do is add some settings to our Ethernet adapter. So what we want to do is make some adjustments to our TCP IPv4. So if we were to select that and head over to properties and we were to click advanced, then what we're going to do is add. So we can add or remove IP addresses in here that we want to communicate with. And I already have a couple of addresses in here that I am using for other devices. So what I'm going to do is click add, and it allows you to add an IP address and subnet mask. And the one that we want to add in here, I've already got it set up in my system, is 192.168.5.100 with a subnet mask 255.255.255.0. So the first thing we want to do is just connect to the robot in the Dobot Studio software. So it should have detected that it's connected via this LAN network to the controller. So if we just hit this connect button where we see Nova 5 just there. So the next thing we want to do is enable the robot by switching this toggle switch. So every time you enable or engage the robot, then you'd get this dialog asking you what the parameters are. So what, especially for the load weight. So the load enable modification here, you would enter the weight in here, the weight of the payload or the axis 6, which at the moment it's just this camera plate. So I'm going to give it a weight of 0.3 kilograms to begin with. And that is quite important to ensure that the software is compensating for the exact load that is on the robot. So we're going to confirm that that is the weight that's on there. And we hear a click. And that positive click is telling me that the drives are now engaged and the robot is ready to move. Now at this point, we can actually move the robot within the Dobot software. And just to check that the joints are moving and we've got motion, we can just go ahead to the jogging panel just to the right-hand side. And for example, if we wanted to move joint 3, we're going to move that in a positive position. And this is quite important because currently where the robot is quite a close proximity in the packing position between this joint and the base of the robot. So we don't want to move it in the wrong direction so that it crashes into itself. Super important. So we're going to actually reduce the speed. If we look at our global speed right at the very top, we're going to want to bring that down to somewhere about 20%, just in case we nudge this in the wrong direction. We can correct ourselves without this crashing in. So we're going to keep an eye on this. We're going to have a look at joint 3 again in the positive. We're going to hit the plus button and just we can see that we have motion coming in the right direction. So we know that is all good and fine. What we're going to do at this point is head over into Lensmaster and get this set up. But the first thing that we want to do is disengage the joints. So we're going to disengage the robot by hitting that toggle switch again. And now we're going to have to change the mode. So now that we're shifting from the actual Dobot software, we're going to change the communication mode from online to TCP IP. By the way, if we don't see the jog menu just on the right hand side, if we come to this control button just here, and we toggle that, we can hide or reveal the jog window. Now to change from the online mode to TCP IP, we're going to have to hit the settings and look for remote control. So on the settings panel here, we're going to look for remote control, and the current mode is showing as online. So this is where we're going to hit the drop down and go to TCP IP. So as soon as we go to this mode, we no longer have control via Dobot Studio. So we can hit apply, and if we did need to go back in there, we just change the mode back to online, and then we have control restored to Dobot Studio. Now, if you're familiar with Lensmaster, this part is going to be pretty easy. But first of all, you've got to select the robot that we're using today, which is the Camerabotics Pixel CRE850. So if we go into our device settings and into the robots selector, we can see we have various different models of robots that can actually work in Lensmaster. And so we need to make sure that we're selecting the correct robot here, which is the CRE850. Now, whilst we're in this menu, there's one critical parameter that we need to check, and that is the IP address for this particular robot. Now, in here, we've got the robot IP of 192.168.5.1. So we have to make sure that the IP address that we put in here in Lensmaster is the same as what's been set on the Dobot controller. So we can apply that, close that window. So now we've got our robot selected and we've checked our IP address. We'll right click on here and hit connect, and that should show it's connected. So we're now communicating correctly with the controller. Next thing we do is right click, go to robot dashboard. And this is pretty important because we need to enable the drives from here. So we need to enable the robot from Lensmaster the same way we did in Dobot software. And it's always good practice when we're switching back and forth from Lensmaster to Dobot software that we disengage in the software that we're working on and then engage in the new one. It just makes the process a lot easier. Trust me on this. Now, in both softwares, whether it's Lensmaster or Dobot Studio, if there are any alarms, you will have to clear those alarms before you can even enable the robot. So it will inhibit you from enabling the robot if there's active alarms. Now, you could clear those alarms from Lensmaster as well as from Dobot Studio. So you have your clear alarms button here if we have any. So we're going to enable this by pressing the on, and we're going to get exactly the same dialog that we had in Dobot Studio. So again, I'm going to enter that same number because we have 0.3 kilo of weight on the axis 6 just there, and then we're going to hit the enable button. We can hear the drives activate. So the very next thing we want to do is hit the home button so we can get this robot in a known position for Lensmaster. Now, if you're using the longer camera plate, this is the point where you'd go ahead and attach that to axis 6. Now, one thing to note here is that the packing position in Lensmaster is not the same as the packing position in Dobot Studio. So when we're folding this robot down again and ready for transport, the packing position in Dobot Studio is not optimized for the cutouts in the carry case for the Pixel that's been supplied by Camerabotics. So it's always advisable to use the packing position from Lensmaster. And I'll just show you how you can quickly get there over in the Lensmaster software. If we come to where the robot is, we'll click on these 3 dots, and we can move these into various positions, including putting into packing position. So we hit that and we confirm. This is now going to drive itself to the packing position that is preferred for the storage case. Now, one important thing to note here as we fold the robot back on itself is that if you have a long camera plate attached to the end, you're going to run into issues just about this point, because we can see this is going to fall and it's going to crash into itself, and that is not what we want ideally. So if you have a longer plate attached to here, ensure that you remove it before you fold the camera into the packing position. And now we can actually go ahead and create some moves by jogging the robot into position, setting our keyframes, and playing those moves back. Pretty simple, pretty intuitive in Lensmaster, and you're pretty much ready to go in a matter of minutes. And that is pretty much for this video, guys. Hopefully that will give you a little bit of confidence when it comes to setting up the Pixel Robot from Camerabotics. There'll be more videos coming in the future about how I use this particular bit of equipment. But for now, if you want to see more of this type of content, please subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.